Hello, bless you, and welcome to another Toybox audio video thingy. Let me just swallow my tongue and present you with these words, which are welcome to the Flexi Oscillator Deep Dive. That's what this is. This flexible oscillator, Flexi Oscillator for short, will be distributed as part of the Toybox user pack. Which is free, but unfortunately these blocks will only be usable in the player. In exactly not the player. They can only be used in the main full reactor version, which is a shame. I'm sorry for you reactor player users, but this is just the product of authentication, encoding, licensing, this kind of thing. But we hope, because this is free and everyone can use it, we try to bring the best out of these possible little oscillator configurations to help you make the nice noises. So let's crack on and look at what we've got. So here we are, the flexible oscillator, otherwise known as Flexi Oscillator. It is a wavetable, I think it's called wavetable oscillator. Yeah, I mean, look, we can smoothly morph between these shapes, which is what kind of good for an oscillator. Often you can only just select a hard shape and that is it, but you can sit smoothly between a sine or a triangle, or a triangle and a saw, or a square and a saw. That's quite cool. It's quite fun. So let's start here. Off and on switch. This is handy for turning it off and on should you want to reduce the CPU of your patch a little bit, should you need to. This switch here is a kind of 3-positioned switch. By default, it obviously, I think, loads up in this pitch mode with a little keyboard and a little key tracking function enabled there. We click it once and we have a transport, which means that the oscillator is tracked to the tempo of the project, which can be handy if you're creating complex waveforms, like maybe this, and you want to use that as a modulation source, but locked to the tempo, so it starts the same every time. Then this is what you might do in this transport synced mode. Let's put that back to something a bit more normal again. And finally, we have this frequency mode, which is for I can hit any note on the keyboard. Doesn't matter which note, but the frequency doesn't change because it's attached to the knob. And we can obviously use other modulation sources to change the pitch of that, should you want to. But if you want to just do like a kick drum, there's your kick drum, sine wave. Okay, let's put it back to pitch tracking. That's the most familiar to a lot of us. Let's move forward. Here we have these, you'll be block users already, I assume, for watching this video, so I won't spend very much time at all on these mod ports. Okay, so you click on these and the little modulation lines appear against each of the modulatable parameters. That's them. Let's have a look at these ports here initially. So we have the pitch port here, which will receive a signal from, I use this MIDI in port now. It's a little bit more trustworthy than the standard NI MIDI in block. So, I mean, I'd recommend using this. I think it exists in the Tangle pack. But I would have a look through. I would use that. I'd replace your MIDI in patches, your MIDI in blocks with our fixed MIDI in block. There's some problem with the Native Instruments one. I can't remember what it is. I think it's a legato mono problem and something else as well. But we like ours better, so we use ours. Down the side of the Flexi Oscillator here, once more, we have spoken about the pitch, which will receive a signal from the MIDI in. We have the reset pitch, reset port here, which when receiving a signal which crosses 0 going up, will reset the phase of the oscillator. That's kind of like so Normally that gets reset every time you press a MIDI note down, because we want the wave to start at the same position every time. You could use this as a sync source trigger. So you have another oscillator that's triggering this as well as the note down, and it will reset the oscillator kind of in real time as you hold the note down. You'll know what a sync option sounds like. That's what that is, but there's also another way of doing that in a minute, which I'll show you. This is the FM import. Audio signal coming in here is basically mapped to the kind of signal to the oscillator, and depending on this FM mode here, it will change the way that the input coming in here affects the actual wavetable itself. One more thing I should note is this pitch snap option up here. This affects the coarse slider. So at the moment, I think it's set to off, which means we can smoothly, in steps of 2 semitones, well, 2 decimal places, which doesn't really, so it's maybe cents to 20.2 cents, fifth of a cent or something, fifth of a note. So that's with it off. When we have it snap, when we have snap on, it just locks to semitones, handy for doing actual music. And the final option on here is ratio, and that, as you can see, has funny looking numbers after other numbers, and these are useful for doing FM stuffs, because normally kind of regular distances like fourths and ninths and stuff like that harmonically aren't kind of ideal for working in FM. So there's kind of idealized ratios that have been set in here. Idealized. Kind of the ratios you might find more often than not in a lot of other FM synthesizers. So that's all part of the FM stuff. So let's just go back to normal semitone snapping. Okay, so that's the FM stuff. This amp port is a new addition. I think it got added in the Tangle pack collection to the oscillators in there, and the Tangle oscillator. What it is a kind of, well, it's an amp port ultimately. So by feeding it a signal, we can control the volume coming out of the oscillator without needing to feed the signal into an envelope. So previously to having this amp port here, I would have used an envelope, like so. So we'll unplug the amp port, and the signal was coming out non-stop, as you might expect. Let's feed it into an envelope here. We'll connect the gate up to there, and we have the out. Actually, let's just turn that off for the second and turn this one down, and we have the out going here. And we've got the gate triggering this envelope. We've got the signal going in to the envelope and then going out of the envelope, being multiplied by the envelope signal. And using the amp input here to decide the volume, the output volume of the oscillator, just feels a bit neater. Just means you don't have as many cables routed around doing stuff. Makes things a bit neater. So we thought that was quite a good little enhancement to our collections. And now let's just connect the envelope from that envelope, the envelope output, back to the amp. So it's behaving as we want. So let's look further down here. We've done the amp. That is the kind of volume out, and we've got the 2 mod ports here that you'll know from other blocks in the Reactor Blocks world. Let's look further down here. We have the kind of oscillator shape, the wave shape that you can select. The appearance of the wave shapes alters depending on the warp setting that you have. Now, the warp settings are where a lot of the power is when you want to be able to adjust the shape of the waveform. So I'm just going to brush over them all, just to show you what they sound like. So we've got a triangle wave, sort of harmonically not that rich, but it's not completely dull like a sine wave. So I'm going to turn off that so I can... And this is a bend function. It's called bend plus. As you can see, it's kind of bending out, even though it looks like it's bending in. You can see that. And I mean, at extreme settings, it turns into what some people might call a needle shape oscillator. Very thin. Lots of cool harmonics up there. We have bend minus, which does the opposite. It squeezes the signal in the opposite way. And if the signal, this signal is equal energy both sides of the 0 point, the point in the middle, which means that this warping for both of those, it's almost similar output. But I mean, you can hear there's differences in the high end, but it will all depend on the waveform that you're using again. So let's stick it to a saw wave, and we can bend that to a needle point and back out again. And we do the same with the bend plus function on the saw wave, and it almost squares it, which is kind of nice. And we can, well, let's keep it on the saw actually. So that's bend plus and bend minus. We have an asymmetric function which, okay, so there's a sine wave. The middle position where it's doing nothing is at 50. And when we warp positively, that we are squeezing the lower half and tightening the upper half of the wave, and in the opposite direction we're squeezing the lower half and largening the upper side of the signal, the positive side of the signal. Again, the differences will, so if you've got a square wave, this behaves more like a pulse width, which you might well want to do. So that's cool. There you go. So asymmetry kind of adjusts the symmetry of the signal, as the name might suggest. Next we have a sync, which I think is really cool. It's kind of like the tangle oscillator, but a bit rawer. And this again works with I think this is essentially again is a hard sync, I believe. So yeah, the signal is reset based on the frequency that this is describing. There you go, that's the sync signal, and it works on all of these. Some of them sound a lot cooler than the others. I do like this one actually. Syncing the saw with a touch of FM. Down a few octaves. Okay, that's the sync. We've got this little hyper function here as well, which does pretty crazy things. Let's put it on something like a square wave. I mean, this is the sine at the beginning of the wavetable cycle. We've got no FM. This goes pretty mental pretty quickly. Ooh, there's some nice stuff up there. That's just a sine wave. let's have a look at a saw. Oh, that's... Ooh. Oh, I really want to put that stuff like 4 octaves below. Let's just quickly try that. Oh yeah, that high stuff tickles me. Does it tickle you? It tickles me. Okay, so let's just get into a more reasonable octave for playing in. That's the hyper. It does mad stuff. Here's a fold function. A couple of, I think the fold and the wrap function, I think are our kind of bespoke functions. They do musical stuff, but not in a way that you will have seen before. And you can see how the signal's being folded over. Folded, folding, 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 more folding, folding, more and there's more folding to be had up there. And we'll look briefly at the last one, the wrap function. And this, well, I mean, look at what it does. Let's go back to maybe, yeah, like a saw between, halfway between a saw and a triangle, I think that is, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, all harmonically interesting functions down here. There's also, well, we'll get to that in a second, actually. So, that covers everything on this page. Let's look at the back here, and what have we not covered? Okay, FM. Let's have a look at FM. So, got a few different modes here. Let's get another oscillator. Let's get another one of these. And hook that up to the pitch. And this up to the gate. And have the whole thing going constantly into the Flexi oscillator. Let's go back to a slightly more normal shape. And just, so here we are. We are affecting the frequency of this oscillator with the shape of this oscillator and the shape and depth of this oscillator. So this is just a little bit of FM, and all I'm doing is changing the modulating waveform. We're modulating at the same frequency, so back to a sine. Okay, what I want to show you is some interesting stuff. So I'm just going to tweak this so we get some high frequency content. There we go. Okay. So what I want you to look at is this high area up here. And I mean, okay. So what we're going to be doing is flicking between, only for the next minute or so, this won't be particularly testing, but I'm going to be flicking this high quality switch on, and what that does is enables extra circuitry to increase the quality of the oscillator. Introduces ILO, and I think the 8 times oversampling is already within the circuitry. So it's just adding another little bit of niceness. That's technical term, obviously, to the oscillator. So if we look at this top end up here and sort of get a sense of what it's doing, because this high quality button only really affects the really high frequencies, and I turned it on and I turn it off. I turn it on and I turn it off. Now, if you can hear the difference between the off and the on, let me just do it once more. This is off. I would urge you to concentrate your listening area on the high frequencies. In fact, what I can do is I've got a high pass already actually up there. So it's only this stuff that I want you to focus on, that I'm trying to show the high quality new circuitry does to the sound. Okay, so now it's on. So when it's off, have a listen to this. I'm not even sure. YouTube may completely destroy any sense of what I can hear in my space here, in my studio space here. But there's basically, it's a kind of brittleness to the high end. There's lots of complex waveforms going on, and we are sending a load of the frequencies we're creating are beyond Nyquist, are beyond the highest frequency that the current sampling rate can deal with. So it creates foldback frequencies, which end up in the form of distortion. And they're very difficult to detect on their own, but when they build up, when they occur on top of each other, when a signal is generating lots of high frequency content that the engine is unable to render properly, you'll end up with aliasing, the sound of aliasing. And I think I have covered that in a previous deep dive in maybe the Bit Crusher or something like that. But ultimately, we don't want aliasing because it adds bad, complex signals. It's like when the frequencies are reconstructed by the analog conversion kind of part of the engine, it can't generate, it can't write, it hasn't got enough points in time to describe the frequencies that we are creating when we do things like FM, because we're creating a lot of high frequencies and we're limited by the sample rate of which we're running, and things called the Nyquist frequency, and that kind of thing stops us having beautiful, pure, clean analog feedback without kind of artifacts. So we're kind of trying to work around the limitations of digital here. Now, what I was describing a second ago, the brittleness that I can hear in this that isn't in this, is so subtle, but it adds up. When you have lots of instruments that are creating these kinds of things, and you've got them all in a mix and you're trying to produce them, they all add up, and you basically get this air of ugliness because the anti-aliasing has created all these frequencies that aren't related to the thing that you're playing, basically. That's the problem. When we're doing distortions and wave shaping and Chebyshev filters and all these kind of cool things we do with sounds to add harmonic complexities to them, the treatments that we're using are often based on old analog kind of principles, and the way that analog principles, as in electronic circuitry principles, with electrons moving around capacitors and resistors and pumping and pushing and all this kind of stuff, the distortion that comes out is harmonically relevant to the sound because it's a product of the signal that's going through it. And that is the case for most distortion, saturation, things that we do with sound to kind of get more harmonically interesting material out of whatever uninteresting, harmonically uninteresting material you're trying to put through these distortions or saturations or whatever. Anti-aliasing adds frequencies that are not that aren't musically part of the sound. So they will, and when you get a lot of them, they build up and they turn ugly, and you begin to, as mix engineers, you're like, how the hell do I get rid of all these aliasing frequencies that this engineer, producer, musician, or whatever has recorded with their computer or bounced into their files. So waffle. I've said enough words now. I just want you to understand and try to listen if you can to the difference between. So this high quality, when the high quality switch is on at the moment, these high frequencies, they're not there. I will turn it off, and you I hope you should be able to hear the difference. Let's turn it off. So, I mean, you can see the difference. If you can't hear it, there's a little collection of spikes that gets a little louder when we disable high quality. I'll turn it back on again, and there's a little area around here of material that will basically drop. And it's subtle, it's small, but those kinds of things add up when you're doing lots of digital music. Okay, so it doesn't actually add that much to the CPU either. To a nice recent freshly born new computer, my machine, it almost we're running at there. We've got 11%, sticks them up to 18 or so. But it's worth it it's worth sacrificing those few CPU cycles just to get a better sound. I mean, we all want as good a sound as we can get, right? And so that's what the high quality switch there does, gives you that. We've got a couple of other options here on the back as well. One shot, which is good for just turning it into, maybe you want it to stimulate a notch filter, comb filter. You want to use it to trigger another highly resonant filter that's going to create some more material out of this very short signal. And there's a couple of these modes. Hard, soft start, and very soft start, which I think has a kind of triangle shape over one cycle of the wave. So one final thing, we have this direction selection here. Direction selection. That's the term we've all been waiting to listen for. Let's move swiftly on. So we've got these options here. What are they? Normally, bi in this domain means bipolar, which means that the signal is crossing the center line and going up and down from it, generating both negative and positive numbers in the signal. If we flip it, basically the whole signal's upside down. We can see that from... It's a smile, it's a frown. And you can also see it in the signal material itself. You can actually see that changing. So let's just get a simpler signal up here for the moment so we can see what's going on. Might even turn that off so we can just see that. There we go, triangle wave, nice, smooth triangle wave. So that's a bidirectional signal, bidirectional bipolar. That's flipped, doesn't really appear to much different because the scope here is detecting zero cross-ups, so it can't really tell that that's a flipped signal. Next is reversed, which is the same. Obviously, you can't really tell because it is a kind of symmetrical signal. Whereas if we put it on, let's put it on the saw, and oh, there you go. So obviously the flipped situation you can see is different as well, but with the reversed saw, because of the way the scope's showing the waves, I promise you, you can just look on the back here. There we go, that's reversed there. And we have a couple of unipolar selections as well. In case you want to use the signal as a modulator, you might be wise to use it in uni mode. Say, for example, if you wanted to use an oscillator as a volume control, so you could have it coming out of here into the amp, and that would basically be turning the volume up and down from 1 to 0, ultimately multiplying it by from 1 to 0 based on the shape that you're doing it with, and which would be better because you don't want to be doing bipolar multiplications because you just get complex inverted signals and stuff. So this uni, there's a couple of uni ones here: uni flip, uni reverse, and regular uni attendees. you can see what's going on. You can figure out a purpose for these. So there you go. That is the oscillator. There's one more function here, which I will present to you now. It is kind of snapshot filter. So let's copy that. I'm using my right click to copy. So you left click to select. I've selected 2 now. So here's the little button down here. You can see it there. I'm going to change this to do something. And then I can turn the speed up on this. And let's do it slower. We morph rather sweetly to the other settings. So we do that again. Let's copy, right click by copy from one snapshot to another by right click dragging. I'll select that one, close the window, keep the tuning, and I'm just going to turn up the warp a bit, put the wavetable in another position, and whack up the FM. That's a nice crazy signal. Let's just put that back on by. All that was a snapshot morph, nothing else. I'm just holding one note down. There you go. Isn't that cool? And you can also gone how to enable it. Maybe you just click it. Yeah, you just click it to enable MIDI triggering of the snapshot changes. And I think yeah, you sort of, as long as you set the connect up correctly, because this MIDI thing won't be listening to this pitch port. That's just a control signal for the oscillator. This is going to be listening for MIDI stuff. So just have a look on the Connect Inspector tab and make sure MIDI in selected, I think. Pretty sure that's how you do it. Just let me know in the comments if you get any issues with that, and I'll make it clearer. And I think that's an off switch for the whole. Oh, that's an off switch for this. So you can turn off the snapshot function, obviously. Yeah. The MIDI side of it. Okay, so that's the oscillator as it is presented to you off the shelf. And I kind of wanted to do a couple of other things, and one of those was basically wang the knobs around. Let's wang the knobs around and just see how far they go. I did a little bit quite far a few minutes ago, but let's do a bit more. Let's do a bit more number of knob wangling in the best possible taste. So what have we got? This is going currently into the FM. I mean, I'm going to get another one of them, another Flexi oscillator, connect the pitch up to the pitch and the gate up to the gate, and have that going into a mod port. I'm going to set it to a crazy, and let's see. How much we can wag a knob around. Wag, pull. So yeah, this is cool, isn't it? That's a nice broken signal there. Let's also, for fun, modulate the wavetable. I feel like I need to modulate the FM port. So let's just the FM out, the FM knob. So let's do that. Into B, into mod port B from another oscillator. Let's change. Let's That's pretty nasty. Let's have I want another one. Let's do that. Oh yeah. And let's... So if we wang that out, and let's set the direction on this to unipolar, which means it's only going positive, which means we can, let's force the FM to be at 0 every now and again. But also let's do other things. Oh yeah, that doesn't work on that. Oh, let's go. Oh yeah, I can't even tell if there's a note there anymore. I mean, it sounds stable, but it isn't. It's all over the place. Oh yeah. Excuse me. It's just another engine. Right, I think I've blasted your ears for long enough. I think I've also spoken about everything I intended to speak about. Yes. So I hope you possibly learnt something in the previous time, which you could have spent watching a Star Trek Next Generation episode. But I'm sure you would much rather be watching modular block tutorials. So thank you for joining me on this journey towards the end of the flexible oscillator. Get those numbers going. I mean, this is a single oscillator with lots of audio rate modulation. Don't we like those words? I love those words. Thanks for joining everybody here. Welcome. Had a good time? Had a good time, everyone? Yep, cool. Thanks for coming. I'll see you at the next one. Enjoy. Stop, watch, and go make some noises now. Now, thank you. Enjoy. Goodbye.